Star Trek has pioneered so many pieces of technology that have since become commercially available. Those hand communicators of the 60s foreshadowed the mobile phones of the 90s and beyond. Pads seemed to be a precursor to the iPod, though transporter technology still seems to be a little way off, frustratingly. Like the transporter, there are yet more technological marvels across multiple universes that are too advanced for us today. One wonders if they were too advanced for the Star Trek universe at times, as many of them simply vanished overnight, despite the tactical or navigational advantages they offered. Higher yield weapons or innovative forms of communication may seem cool at the moment, but when the dust settled and cooler heads prevailed, they were tossed out of the nearest airlock, rarely to be spoken of again. Here we examine some of those wonders of the 23rd century and beyond, so suddenly offered and so suddenly taken away. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 11 incredible new technologies that were immediately abandoned. Number 11. Borg-aided revivification. In Mortal Coil, Neelix discovers what truly waits for him on the other side of the Great Curtain. For him, it's nothing. Darkness, oblivion, and no heavenly apparitions made death seem like something he wouldn't enjoy, perished the thought. Thankfully, 7 of 9 was there to bring him back into the light thanks to her handy leftover nanoprobes. Death is cured and all is well, let us never speak of it again. For episodes like Mortal Coil, the intention seems to have been exploring the philosophical nature of death, belief, and what lies between. While other properties might use heating pads and shock therapy to achieve this, Star Trek has future technology to speed things up. The problem here is that it did its job just a little bit too well. When 7 brought Neelix back with the Doctor, she proved that she could reverse death. That's not just important for Neelix's story, that's the biggest medical breakthrough since retro-salamanderism. If one were to imagine that it isn't a catch-all and that 7's nanoprobes are finite, one would still have to wonder why catching drones isn't the single greatest prize in the known galaxy. It certainly makes the actions of Bjayzl and her cohort a little more understandable. Not that we're condoning vivisecting XBs. Number 10. Transwarp beaming. In Star Trek Into Darkness, John Harrison, aka Khan, casually renders all space travel obsolete. This would seem like an enormous tactical advantage to anyone who got their hands on this technology, so when Montgomery Scott is seen holding Khan's device, it's a good day for Starfleet. Unless, that is, you're near Starbase Yorktown. The invention of transwarp beaming, allowing the user to move between star systems in the case of John Harrison, was revolutionary. Rather than relying on cumbersome starships to get from point A to point B, it could now be achieved as easily as moving between transporter pads. This technology seems to be a critical advancement that should have been implemented throughout the fleet. In Star Trek Beyond, Starbase Yorktown is cut off from the Enterprise via the Necro Cloud. With a handy transwarp beaming device, that cloud would mean nothing, meaning no one on the Enterprise needed to die, as usually happens within about 3 minutes of a mission beginning. Instead, the tech was seemingly shelved after Khan's capture, and the dead bodies began to rise. Number 9. Portal tech. The portal technology stolen from Daystrom Station seems like an odd invention from the jump. Perhaps it was never utilised to its full capabilities, unless one counts destroying a Starfleet recruitment centre or doing a switcheroo with torpedoes as the end goal. Vadic certainly has fun with this tech, but after she jettisons it, it's never mentioned again. Though hardly an exhaustive account of history, the 3rd to 5th seasons of Discovery don't mention it either, at least not the Starfleet version, regardless of what Maul and Locke were using in the 32nd century. It seems then that it was invented, someone had some fun with it, and it was immediately consigned to history as a bit of a laugh, unless you were caught in one of those portals. It does beg the question, what was the point? Was it a shifty way to break into some bank vaults? Did someone misunderstand the range of a Stargate? Or was it simply invented for the simplest reason of all? Because we could. Number 8. The TR-116 rifle with transporter tech. With the outbreak of war in the 24th century, Starfleet was faced with a fundamental shift in its existence. It was founded to seek out new life and new civilizations. Now, it had to find a way to stop them in their tracks. When going up against an enemy that makes the Klingons look tame, what's the best course of action? Inventing a new long-range weapon seemed perfect for ground assaults. The siege of AR-558 remains a chilling chapter in Federation history, one marred with huge loss of life, exposure to insidious anti-personnel mines, and an ongoing slog to hold the fort. The soldiers in place relied on standard Starfleet weapons, though even those were usually short range. The TR-116 rifle was introduced in Field of Fire, depicting a weapon that could now fire over much greater distances. By attaching a microtransporter to the barrel, the shooter could pinpoint targets several kilometers away. As Chulok and Esri Dax demonstrated, it was at least capable of firing across the width of DS9. That this weapon is introduced and so quickly removed from Starfleet suggests a flaw in the design, though it seemed frighteningly capable of doing its job when the grieving Vulcan began his murder spree. Number 7. Interphase cloaking. Though both the Romulan Star Empire and Starfleet experimented with interphase cloaking, the technology seemingly was abandoned very early on. For Starfleet's example, that's understandable. Everything in connection with the experiment was a violation of the Treaty of Algernon, so they simply couldn't continue with the experiment. What, then, for the Romulans? An empire so concerned with maintaining secrecy and employing a wide network of spies would surely jump at the chance to master this incredible technology. So what happened? Introduced in the next phase, the interphase cloaking device served a dual purpose. It turned its subjects invisible, but it also rendered them intangible, allowing them to pass through everything, except the floor. This may have been an extrapolation of an earlier technology in use during the 2320s aboard the space station Baram, though it certainly owed a lot to the device stashed aboard the USS Pegasus. It's a little hard to believe that the Romulans simply gave up their research on this technology following the accident aboard their science vessel, so this may be a case of the simple fact that you haven't heard anything more about it, which means it's working perfectly. Number 6. Cristobal Rios' magical doodad. After the crew of La Sirena crash lands on Coppelius and encounters Dr. Alton Soong and his synth colony, Rios is gifted with a magical device. This device is a thought-based replicator, named a fundamental field replicator. Simply by using one's imagination, one can make this device fix or create almost anything. The device fixes critical components on the ship, bringing the ship back to full power. In the skies orbiting the planet and facing Commodore O's fleet, it creates images of hundreds of La Sirenas to confuse the Romulan sensors. This magical doohickey, similar to the sonic screwdriver from Doctor Who, can seemingly do whatever is needed for the plot at that moment in time, until it can't. It surely would pique the interests of any engineer or scientist desperate to understand its flagrant shattering of the laws of physics. However, instead of becoming the new golden item at the Daystrom Institute, Rios obviously breaks it a moment after La Sirena goes to warp at the end of A in Arcadia Ego Part 2 and never tells anyone. Number 5. Hollow communicators. For this entry, we're talking about the specific type of hollow communicators that were featured on Deep Space Nine, which at least projected an image that didn't flicker every 5 seconds. Honestly, for Discovery and Picard, what happened? The Defiant in the 24th century was able to project a sustained, seemingly solid image, but the Discovery and La Sirena struggled to project images more stable than a CD player trying its best in the boot of a 90s era car. Play, bump, skip, repeat. In Deep Space Nine, the tech at least seemed to work. This proved handy for face-to-face run-ins with former security chiefs and also essential for allowing courtroom dealings with admirals back at Starfleet. The main issue with this technology was, at least in the case of the USS Defiant, it took up a sizable portion of the bridge. Whether it was the captain himself or a beleaguered Miles O'Brien, the tech was stripped before the end of the show's 5th season, and that was that. Number 4. Tricobalt devices. While there has been a certain amount of retconning through the years, Tricobalt devices were introduced in Star Trek Voyager's debut episode Caretaker. They were fired like photon and quantum torpedoes, though their yield was significantly higher. They were slower to detonate than normal torpedoes, which makes them relatively useless in a battle scenario. Tuvok fired 2 Tricobalt devices at the Caretaker's array, effectively vaporizing it. Despite what a paranoid 7 of 9 might have you believe, it was unusual that Voyager would carry these devices, and they were evidently the only 2 aboard, as they are never depicted again. While the technology has been mentioned from time to time in the years since, and chronologically beforehand, Tricobalt devices were effectively a handy MacGuffin to strand the ship in the Delta Quadrant, covering the bases before disappearing back up those tubes into the dark. Number 3. Firing while cloaked. In Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, a group of renegade Klingons, working alongside Starfleet and Romulan operatives to ensure the continuation of galactic hostilities, managed to overcome the problem that prevented firing while cloaked. Though the extent of Starfleet and Romulan innovation remains a mystery, those serving under General Chang must have taken this particular secret to their graves. Firing while cloaked is arguably the greatest military development of the 23rd century, finally allowing fleets of secret ships to be built and setting the scene for a grand conquest of the Alpha and Beta quadrants. However, rather than usher in a new era of glory for the Empire, some idiot in Chang's crew didn't save the files to the cloud and the technology's never seen again. While the technology existing on one ship alone certainly adds stakes and tension, it doesn't make an awful lot of sense. In truth, it gave the Klingons too much of an edge in galactic affairs, so when Chang's bird of prey exploded for the first time, it took with it all of the secrets of this outstanding discovery, presumably to the rest of the Empire's chagrin. I sure hope nobody mentioned it to the Remans. Number 2. The Spore Drive. The Spore Drive technology was an odd invention in Star Trek, and not simply because of when it was introduced to the franchise. Though the issues of the timeline have been well covered at this stage, the logic behind Starfleet's apparent embracing and shunning of the propulsion system is confusing. In the 23rd century, it was an experiment with dangerous possibilities, as the crew of the ill-fated USS Glenn discovered. The supposed destruction of the USS Discovery put the project on ice for almost a millennia though, as we've said before, not informing Janeway was a bit of a dick move. By the 32nd century though, the project specifically had been shelved. The USS Discovery arrived almost 100 years after warp drive had become allegedly obsolete. Honestly, did no one think to blow some dust off some classified folders? And if that was indeed the case, the arrival of Discovery should have heralded a new golden age of science for Starfleet. Instead, the ship had barely stopped spinning before Stamets was informed the Spore Drive was once again being shelved, this time in favour of a pathway drive. It's hard to be a mycologist in the universe, it seems. Number 1. Transporter-aided rejuvenation. This is an odd one, as it reared its head a couple of times, though just as quickly seemed to be swept under the carpet. With the invention of the transporter, Star Trek seemed to have found a way to extend life indefinitely. Although Scotty and Mbenga both used the device to put themselves and their loved ones in stasis, they could just have easily have turned the clock back. In the counterclock incident, Robert and Sarah April managed to restore everyone on the Enterprise to their correct ages. They'd been turned into children, just go with it. Thanks to their patterns being saved in the transporter logs. Dr. Pulaski is rejuvenated in a similar style in Unnatural Selection. While there may be a caveat on this, the transporter remembers the last pattern that went through. This could easily be co-opted to reverse the aging process altogether. Consider this, Pulaski, for example, retains her memories from her aged self, though is returned to her usual age. If that pattern was saved in a separate folder, does it not stand to reason that she can live indefinitely, even if she always remains the same original age? The Aprils elected not to use the transporter for this handy age hack, though the technology is certainly effective. Perhaps it is this existential capability of the transporter that caused it to be quietly swept away, never to be mentioned again. And that's everything for our list today, folks. Thank you so much for watching along. What did you think? I hope you enjoyed it. And did we miss anything? Let us know. Make sure you're following us on the various socials. We're at TrekCulture or at TrekCultureYT on Instagram. I am at Sean Ferrick. Please make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. We're almost at 320,000 subscribers. Oh my God, thank you so much. You're wonderful, you're awesome. Live long and prosper till I see you again. Make sure you're looking after yourself. Make sure you're being kind to yourself and take a few minutes every day just to breathe. Kind of step away from things like news and this barrage of everything that's going on, because you deserve to look after yourself. Thanks a million, folks. I'll see you soon.